Welcome to your late daily game face, starting this morning because of me.
Oh.
It was not because of you. Well, it
Could
sort
have
of
been.
was on the end, but not really. I was late this morning because I had a meeting this morning.
Could just as well be me.
But it wasn't. So don't put yourself down.
I'm okay.
Good morning. And yes,
I
welcome.
get plenty of people to do that for me.
Welcome to your daily game face. I am Dr. Kim Lannon. I am here with you on this last day of April 2025. Can you believe it's May?
No.
And it's beautiful out.
Everything's moving so quickly. Seems.
I know, right? But but maybe that's because we're in the year of you.
Okay.
Right? You're in the year of you,
time.
so you're feeling, you're focused on you. You're focused on how to make yourself healthy, well, growth related, learning, changing, growing, right?
Yep.
Yep. Yep. You're just going with that, aren't you, Lou?
Yes.
All right. And I'm still with a voice and
positive
hopefully
mindset.
You're in the mindset. Hopefully my nose, I just said to myself, my nose, because everything is spawning outside.
I bet it's brutal.
And it's my voice. I took some allergy medicine.
My cat was sneezing his brains out this morning.
Aw, poor Bubba.
He doesn't seem to be bothered by it.
But he's sneezing.
He's sneezing.
Oh, I'm so glad that you actually care a crap about your cat.
I do.
Not typical.
Hmm?
It's not typical for you to ever even mention the cat, that we even know that you have a cat.
I have two.
That you have two cats is even more,
I'm
amazing.
sarcastic, but I'm a caretaker.
Uh-huh.
You're okay.
So, anyway, well, the allergies are quite something. So the one brutal thing for so many people is the allergy season.
Mm-hmm.
And it's up for a lot of people. A lot of people that never used to have allergies say, "Oh my God, I have allergies now." And I was not present over the last weekend for like a day and a half, and I was north of here, not in the spot that I would typically go to.
Okay.
But they're very behind, so my allergies were down, and I had my voice back for like a day.
Oh, they're
because
botanically behind.
They are botanically behind, and they still have snow. So it was weird because like there's a line between the one spot and the next spot of snow, flowering trees.
Just
allergies, no allergies.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So we still got runoff to go through down here.
Yes,
okay.
we do. I would say we do.
Yeah.
But anyway, so welcome to May tomorrow. And it's just, I know it's not today, but I'm just wishing it, because now I always think of May as now we're into the new section of the year, right? Like January to April is like the one section of winter.
Yep.
And now May, at least in New England, we're getting ready both psychologically and physically to go into a very different set of, mental states, because people are coming out of that gloom and doom time for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And they're also physically coming into the spending more time outside and doing weekend warrior things and getting injuries and all, right? Because people get excited.
So is it the May of you?
It's the May of you,
mm-hmm.
Right? It's the year of you, but definitely the May of you. So May often is the setup for, I think of it psychologically, for people to get a really good mindset for summer. And because people's whole dynamic in their energy level, their even job, outside activity, like everything changes just with the moment of some warmth. We've had the last week, if you're not from around here, I know the country's doing this, but right now up here, we've had exceptional warmth and, an oddity. And of course, the entire weekend is always raining, and when I'm not working, it's raining.
Yep.
But the warmth brings things for people to, be happy about, and it lifts people's moods, and people are out doing more, and people are more social, and people are more activity based. And so the psychology and the level, typically the level of health and wellness goes up for a lot of people. And it also provides a time where some people struggle in a different way than they do in the winter, because unfortunately the year of you, if you haven't been practicing it since before January or even since January, you want this amazing beach body, and you want this amazing outlook on life, and apparently it's really warm in the studio
It
today.
is really, yeah.
I'm
I was
looking,
fixing the air
I'm
conditioning this
looking
morning
at the
before you came in.
heat. And so we focus on growth. Here's the time. Every time you see um, uh, a warm day or a sunny day like today it started out not being that way, but I'm encouraging people to begin their May and today with waking up with the intention of something like growth based. Like, let's go with the month of May is growth, and
Okay.
getting into how do you look at your day for something that you're going to learn or change or grow from on a daily. And if you don't look with intention into your day and you just kind of go through your day, they will run together and blend together,
Yeah.
which is what people do. And then they get very complacent, complicit with their lives. They get stale and stagnant. And they, or they do the thing that I see a lot of people do, and I'm sure you can relate, is they wait for the weekend.
Yep.
Like they go Monday through Friday of just kind of hammering it out and just being in the moment of that. And then all they're doing is thinking like, okay, Friday night to Sunday, what am I doing? And they try to pack it in instead of doing that, which is what I call the weekend warrioring, right?
Yep.
Is really look at how do you live, even if you're going to your work every day or whatever, how do you live every day with something more intentional so that you can grow? So I've been asking a lot of my clients that are very much into this, is to really, some people are incredibly into like the energy of the earth and spirit based, like how to really connect with, grounding behaviors, psychologically grounding behaviors. So May is a great time for nature. So go out in the morning if you have the time, so from the basics, sit on your deck or sit
Yeah.
on your patio, have your cup of coffee in the sun, and no phone.
That
Right.
was a big moment yesterday, just sitting on my deck.
Isn't it
Like a
amazing?
normal person.
Right. Like a normal person.
Yeah.
Right. And I encourage, don't use your phone. Don't have your phone, because then it takes you out of the moment of the intention. So being able to sit on your front porch, your deck, or whatever you have, even or a front stoop if you don't have like a backyard and you're in the city, but really just focusing for a few minutes, even if it's 5 and you don't have much more, of just soaking in the day. And that's starting the day with intention. You don't have to now make an intention. You've just intentionally gone outside and put yourself to start the day. You can do it before you shower. You can do it after you shower. Just make it happen for yourself. And it doesn't have to be this grand thing, because that's one of the things that people get caught up in, is that it has to be this very specific thing. So in addition to that, if you are able to go beyond that, go ahead and set an intention for the day. What do you want from your day? Ask yourself, what do you want from today? What do you want to say at the end of the day you got accomplished, or what would make you feel accomplished? Because in the year of you, or the May of you, what's your day-to-day goal? And not like, by the end of May, I want this. Don't do that to
Yeah.
yourself. Just do it. Live in the day, live in the moment, live in the present, live in the here and now. What do I want from now and today, or even the next 5 hours, or in my work day? I want to get these things done. I want to make sure I have this done, and so on and so forth.
So it can be a mundane thing. It can be just an accomplishment. I'm going to pay this bill today, or I'm going to make this phone call today.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, the paying the bill thing, for people, I mean, I know a lot of people are on schedules. I think that's one thing, but also I think what you just said about, I just lost it because I was thinking about paying the bills. The other thing you said,
Making a phone call.
making a phone call, the things that people procrastinate on, right? Good morning, Chris. The things that people procrastinate on are the things that I would focus people on for like the intentional living of the day.
Yep.
Is because that's what people will not put the intention towards. They'll do everything that they want to do versus everything they need to do.
Yeah.
And so if you put an intention to something that you need to do, like, I need to really make this phone call today, or I really need to, and it's been on my plate for 6 weeks, or someone keeps calling me.
That's the key, right? Getting it off your plate.
It's getting it off of your plate.
Yep.
Because then what you're doing is you're relieving the weight off of your shoulders of carrying it, whether you're actively thinking about it all the time, or whether you sort of compartmentalize it, which people are really good at. Like, it's there, but you don't really think about it, but it's always there, because that little subconscious, unconscious piece of us holds onto that stuff. And we're really good by default socially to be able to put it aside and just put it over there. But eventually it, rears its ugly head and brings itself to the surface, because that call comes again to remind you, hey, you haven't called me back, or hey, you haven't texted me back, or hey, you haven't done that email. So if that's that could, so the intention of the day could be as simple as that, as basic as that.
Yeah.
If you have a
That's basic mental hygiene.
it's
The
basic mental
thing you're
hygiene.
carrying on your shoulder, get it off your shoulder.
Well, it's also it's taking care of yourself.
Yep.
And really not getting bogged down. Like it's like, let's free ourselves. Think of May as like that freeing time. There's something to be said about, April showers bring May flowers. Think of like growth and blooming, like you're trying to grow yourself over May. And so that means eliminating, the weeds, think of the lawn care, like eliminating the weeds, picking up all the twigs, getting rid of all that stuff that's choking out the lawn or the flowers from really being able to come up and bloom, because by June we want to have a different part of the year of you. But right now it's the growth time, and really being able to, we sort of prep January through April, like getting us prepped, really doing these things. But now it's like, okay, let's put some intentions more so, like really more firm into the ground, like planting seeds, so that we're grounded into the earth, we're grounded into who we are. So that we become who we want to be, or our best selves, so that we can be our best selves for other people. And I think if you practice that on a daily, that's important. So we set the intention. Now, let me give you some other examples of intention. And, I'm big on, obviously, and my whole client base is really big on making sure people get exercise. Exercise does not have to go out and run the marathon. Exercise is, such nice weather, especially for people that live in nice weather right now. Even if it's a 10-minute walk, it's not the same. And I've said this before, there's the NEAT concept, NEAT, the non-exercise activity thermo, right? It's that's the vacuuming or cleaning around the house or puttering. That burns calories. That is not the same thing as doing an intention for exercise that's for your mental health and for your physicality. Putting in exercise is intentionally going in and like walking on your walking pad, or walking on the street for 20 minutes, or doing, running up and down your stairs 10 times. Like it has to be with the intention that I'm going to do that, and setting it as, and I said this, I think last week or the week before, if you are not a person who's good at keeping your structure around those things, and you have what I call the fail point, don't put yourself into the fail point. Say, I'm going to do it today. Like, don't say I'm going to do it 5 times this week. Just say, here it is, Wednesday. I'm going to make sure that I get this in because it's a beautiful day, and make a point to make a schedule with yourself. So one of the things that people don't do is, like, if you make an appointment with me, you show, right?
Yep.
If you make an appointment to yourself, why do you not show? Right? People will always put and I say always intentionally, they'll put the always in there that, well, I'll move it off into something else. This person wants to meet me for coffee, I won't do my walk, or I'll do it after. I've done that. I'm notorious for saying like, I'll do it later. But if I don't really, like, especially like big time was like the marathon training, people would say, let's go out for dinner. I'm like, I have to run first. I'll meet you after. Right. And if I didn't do that, like my growth would go down. I wouldn't be able to do my training.
You consider self-care optional.
Right. Because, and we're socialized into the self-care piece as being optional, because it's still, even though your generations have changed, we're still, even though some generations are really good at being incredibly full of self, very differently, but it's about being able to take care of yourself so that you can be present because you've done for you, and it's not selfish. And people get into that generational thing of, but it's still considered selfish. So it is an option for me not to do that, because then I don't want to miss out on that, because then people will be upset, or I'm a people pleaser, or whatever it is. Right. Instead, you have to say like, no is a full sentence. There's lots of full sentences that people don't use. Right. And so it's about saying, I can't do that.
Those generations you mentioned about being full of self, but not self-care, it's different.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost self-pleasure than more self-care.
Right. It's about like people who overindulge in what makes them happy versus being able to
pleasure seeking.
Right. It's about what like makes them happy over, being present for other people. And there's a big difference between making sure that you get your workout in, or making sure you take care of your 3 errands that you've been waiting to do for 3 weeks, and it puts other people off for 2 hours or something. Like, those are healthy things. It's when people, there's the difference is like the indulgent and the
Mhm.
very permissive generation of, or people, it's mixed in generations, but there's certain generations right now that specifically are much more entitled and permissive. But that's that I do for me first all the time, and you're a second thought or a third thought or a fourth thought. And that's out there. That's a very different concept in terms of
Yeah.
that's not self-care. That's just being selfish.
Yeah.
Right. But a lot of times the older generations will see it as, even if you're doing it with the intention of just being healthy for yourself, will see it as, I can't believe you chose to do that over coming to blah blah blah. And it's like you have to be able to handle that and sit with the uncomfortable feelings of someone being like that with you, because that's them not taking care of themselves and relying on you to fill their cup up.
Yep.
Which is a different concept as well, versus someone who is very selfish, in terms of just always doing whatever they want because they want to. That's a different mindset, and people are called selfish for doing like the actual intentional living of like, this is not something I can do today. I will have to do it with you some other time. I'll take a rain check, and people being okay with sitting with that, and you being okay with sitting with people might be upset.
Yep.
It's the adversity. It's the adversity of creating an environment that might have an uncomfortable feeling for both parties. But most people who are healthy and live with intention can understand that that's a healthy boundary. And there's people that don't do healthy boundaries very well, because they want to push the envelope. They will circumvent you to find a way to get you to do what they want. And some people are really good at manipulating or maneuvering that. And then some people are not. Sometimes it comes at a cost of having to really keep setting a boundary. And that's not a pushback to the other person of getting rid of them. It's about saying, nope, I can't do that. Nope, this is enough. No, that's not okay. And that can become exhausting. And I have a high tolerance, unfortunately, which I've talked about. I have a way too high a tolerance for allowing push against boundaries, even though I can hold the boundary. And then it's like, because I'm always hopeful that people will
figure it out,
learn.
Yeah.
So I'll hold the boundary solid, and I'll keep reinforcing without ever moving the boundary. And then at some point, usually the person either falls in line and figures it out and learns and then respects it, or, which happens more often than not, or you occasionally get the people that just cannot do it. And they try, I'm sure if people are watching, I'm showing like, it's like, how do I get around the boundary? How do I get, all the different ways. And eventually for people, that's when people do the tap out, right? It's like, I'm out, like you're out and I'm out, and you got to go.
But we talked about this earlier in the year review about training. People don't like the term, but training people
how to treat you.
Right.
Well, but it's
and sometimes that means repeated boundary setting.
Well,
so they figure it out.
Well, human beings are redundant and repetitive.
Yeah.
Right. We're pattern seekers. And so in trying to grow through that, you have to know your patterns and which ones are working for you and which ones don't. And some people who do not have good self-awareness, which a lot of people don't have great self-awareness, and then you add a mental health issue on top of it.
Wait a second, are you telling me some people do have self-awareness?
Yeah.
I don't know if I've met many of them.
Well, there's not a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not true. I shouldn't say that. There are people that have no self-awareness. I mean, like devoid, like that's right.
Yeah.
And we know lots of people like that, right? Then you have people who have selective self-awareness, which I would say there's a lot of selective self-awareness things, right? It serves a purpose, it serves their purpose, it works in their favor, things like that. And then there's the very few, and by few I don't mean like a handful. I mean, there's a fair amount of the few that have good self-awareness because the pain has become great enough for them in their lives to know that they don't want to keep having that happen. So they're intentionally now living with awareness of, I have to be present with this. I have to make sure I protect my mental cup. I have to fill my own cup. I can't rely on other people to do it for me. It's not my responsibility to make other people's cup filled. It's, and that's across like professionally, personally, even an acquaintance, like whatever you're doing, it's important that, at the first part of your day, you're a human being first, and it doesn't matter, for all the reasons and excuses, justifications that someone might give you of like, well, yeah, but you should do this because, you're my daughter, or you should do this because you're my therapist, or it's still, you're a human being first. And, boundaries are important, and living with intention of this is how we're going to be in the world, and this is how it's going to be. And that's really hard for people, but that's growth. So when you live with awareness or mindfulness, you're living with intentional awareness to be your best self, and you're doing it. And even if you're not setting up boundaries out in the world verbally, you're setting up this space for your mental well-being. People are going to butt up against that sometimes because we're socialized to butt up against it. We're socialized to try to figure out how to bypass. If we raise children with very limited structure or too much structure, there's a bypass in that person when they get to be, a teenager and adult, to circumvent other people that are good at setting those boundaries. So growth is very hard in a lot of ways. But for
again,
those,
it's not linear, right? You can have parts
Right.
of your day where you're setting
Right.
boundaries and protecting your space and all that, but it doesn't always work that way. So carving out some time where you're protecting your boundaries and protecting your space and your mindset is important. You're not going to get it 24/7.
In what?
You're not going to get it 24/7.
Yeah, well, you're not going to get it 24/7, and knowing that but here's, surrounding yourself with people or surrounding yourself with environment and creating an environment that holds for the possibility of both health and unhealthy things, people, places, times, whatever around you, helps you live with the intention of the day of you're aware that things can fluctuate, and it prepares you for not feeling big roller coaster rides of that, because you're already aware and ready for it.
Right.
Not in a hyper vigilant, like, shocking, intense way, but more of like a very continuous, that is linear, continuous moment of, I know that this can shift. And so that if something happens, we don't fall apart. And if something doesn't, we're not up at the ceiling going, this is wonderful. It's like knowing that the day should really ebb and flow with yourself sitting. If you sit yourself in a good space and you are able to maintain your space mentally, physically, spiritually, whatever it is for you, that whatever comes in and out is going to be tolerated easier and healthier for you.
Not letting
and the growth will be there for you.
Not letting what happened to you at 11 o'clock at work take over with your kids tonight at 7.
Right. Yeah. Or the anticipation.
Oh, the anticipation.
The anticipation is really important there. I think that because so many people live in anticipation of what might come or what has happened that might then bring this other thing, when in fact it doesn't usually happen that way. But people sit in anticipation, and that's anticipatory anxiety is centuries old. I
used to be so good at that.
That's exactly because that's the hardwired piece of us. That's the bear in the back of the cave, right? Yep. It's like we are in survival mode. We are human beings. So no matter what relationship, no matter what field you're in, you have boss, I work for people, like we have friendships, we have relationships. There's always that thing of survive. You have to be able to survive. And are you a heightened survive person, or are you in the healthy, normal, people who've suffered trauma and who have suffered is probably not my best word, but people who have had trauma in their lives. That does not mean you have had to have some massive thing happen. It's just, born into deprivation is trauma, right? That's trauma. So we all have something, right? Traumatic. But when people have trauma and they live in that space, by the time you're an adult, like a young adult, I always use this visual of like, we have a radar that comes up, and it's like a red radar. We have a yellow radar and a green radar. And we want the green one to be like, oh, everything's good, and down. Yellow is supposed to come up when like, oh, I sense a little something. And red is like, oh, alert, alert, alert.
Yep.
When we come into spaces with people who have trauma, and they unconsciously and subconsciously, and sometimes very purposely, want to trigger us, they will bring in because their red radar is on all the time,
right?
Because they have trauma, and their trauma, if they've never worked through it, or they have worked through it, but really have been resistant to it, which many people do, like, they don't get help for it, or they do, but they do it selectively, right? But their radar is always on, that red radar. So they bring it into your life, and they're pushing up against yours to like get you to be with them. And that's a lot of everyday life, because it's the bear in the back of the cave. It's something now that's so hardwired into them that it's like they have to live in the chaos that they've created. They grew up maybe in chaos. They bring chaos to your life. They bring chaos to their lives. In order to function, that's what they have to do. I mean,
So many people are like that.
and,
Where
and
they
right.
It's almost a chaos fetish.
Yes.
Chaos, a conflict fetish. They seem to want it.
Right. Well, because that's what they know
Yeah.
keeps
devil
their
you know.
balance. It's
Yeah.
what they know. It keeps their balance. And people often will ask me, especially when I point out to them like they're doing that, and they have good awareness, and they can hold that in their space and go, oh, I didn't realize that. They're surprised, because they're like, oh God, because I can usually relate it back to like, yeah, you grew up in this chaos, and here you are patterning the exact same thing, paralleling it in your life now. I would say the majority of clients that I see, like I would say almost all of them, when I point stuff out like that has to be pointed out, or we work with that, they see it and it moves them. It gives them growth, because they're like, oh my gosh, I'm creating the parallel pattern of what I grew up with. It's chaos to keep me stable. And it's like, yeah, but it's not keeping you stable, and that's when I say there's two roads to go. They're both hard. You can go with the one, that's hard. But the other one might be hard because it's a change road. But wouldn't you rather have the hard that's going to end better than the one that keeps bumping you up into this wall of like chaos?
Otherwise, it's fight or flight your entire life.
And there's the radar.
Yeah.
It's the fight or flight all the time, because you're always up with the red radar, and it's always on. It never gets shut off, because you're not working on shutting it off, because you've been trained through time and practice of your own volition to keep practicing it. And I had this conversation with a client yesterday. I said, in lieu of your family, and this person's in their 70s, and I said, in lieu of being with your family now from when you were young and in your 20s and 30s, you don't need them to have the tape in your head anymore. You do it to yourself, and they gaslit you, for lack of better terms, and now you gaslight yourself. You self-sabotage because you don't have anyone else to play the tape. And he had that moment of aha yesterday to go, oh yeah, oh my gosh, I didn't think of it that way. And he's like, and then he was like, I'm 70 blah 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 years old, and I can't believe and I'm like, it's okay, but here's a perfect example of like the May of you. Have an aha moment. Doesn't matter if you're 76 years old or 72 years old or 40, you know what I mean? And like, if you're seeking it, life is that journey. Like, have the aha moment, go, oh my God. And then, then you can be open to the next thing of like living with intention of how to recognize you're living in that chaos, how to then move yourself to the growth. You're clearing the debris field on the lawn, essentially. It's now the tulips can come up. Now the daffodils can come up, or whatever silly little thing you want to think of it like, or the tree can bloom because now it's not being strangled by the weeds. You are that tree. You are that flower that can now have the growth because you've had the aha moment, because you have the intention to have, what can I have better awareness about today? There's an intention. You don't have to exercise. Have an intention of, what can I do to have better self-awareness today, to have growth? What do I bring to the table that contributes to my zhuzh?
The key for me was figuring out I have control over this.
Yeah.
I was dealing with a lot of trauma and a lot of depression, and I got to the point where, what if I set this down for a half an hour?
Right.
Go watch Seinfeld.
Right. No, it's not Seinfeld.
That's right. Whatever it is.
Yes.
Whatever it is that gets you out of it. Go for a drive.
Right. Or go for a walk. Right. But
nothing catastrophic is going to happen if I set this down for half an hour. And once you realize you can set it down for half an hour, you realize you have control over it. You can set it down for longer periods.
And I think for the growth point, and because I'm going to relate to like some mental health issues here about like people over lifetime, starting very young in life, like 11, 12, 13, because we are, as human beings, don't feel and believe or have anyone there as a resiliency person to like say, hey, you have control over this. And people get trained into believing they don't have control and externalizing it. They go into like their life with nothing can change this. This is how it is. And they will perpetuate that. And so the mental health piece of that is, okay, people seek self-soothing. So what do? They eat, they drink, they smoke, they do drugs, they have sex, they gamble,
Shop.
They shop, right? So they go to all these things that become these long-term patterns to fulfill the need that's not being met so much earlier in childhood all the way up through this point. And so then instead of watching Seinfeld or going for a drive or listening to music or going out on the porch and sitting for 5 minutes or going for a nature walk and just being, they feel the need to not sit with themselves.
Yep.
Because sitting with oneself is not that's too much growth, right? That's growth,
Yep.
right? To sit with yourself and be able to sit, right? That's why I say for people to start with a couple minutes, because it's so hard for people. But to be able to sit with oneself and or go out on a walk and not be talking on the phone or listening to Spotify or even a podcast, which, I want people to listen to my podcast, but but you can listen to this or listen to a health podcast or listen to something that's going to give you growth, not, something that's going to recapitulate or repeat your same patterns and behaviors. I think that people come far too late in life to, if they get there, to the thought of, wow, there's 500 other options I could be doing to have growth. Yep. And although I'm belaboring the growth point here, it's the point. You need to get out of the patterns of, addiction is a solution for so many people to their feeling like, oh, I can have growth because it makes me feel connected. It makes me feel like I'm understood better. It makes me come out of my shell more. It makes me able to feel good. It's all temporary.
It occurred to me yesterday when I was in my late teens and driving, or early 20s, what it was for me was going to concerts.
I have people in my life that do that.
As a Patriots season ticket holder, I went to Red Sox games. You had to get yanked out of it. Now, yesterday, I'm sitting on the deck for 5 minutes because this is it.
Yeah.
This is all it takes.
Yeah.
Right? I have control over it. I don't need AC/DC.
Well, yeah.
Ladder.
I literally just on Monday night had this conversation in brief that I've had a perpetual conversation with someone in my life who shall go unnamed currently, but she'll know who I'm talking about. She's set up for, I think, 11 or 12 concerts this summer. And I just looked at her. I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And she's like, but I love it. I'm like, what are you running from?
Yep.
And she knows. But it's that, and it's
take a drive and put a CD on.
Well, she does that too.
Yeah.
Right. She does that too. No CDs though, but she does, but it's not just her. It's like, there's a culture right now, and this is part of that generation, like the youngest generation right now, that's within the, the late teens into the early 30s. That's very much about fulfill with instant gratification, need to fulfill, can't be sitting alone, can't sit with oneself, can't have to be with someone, have to be doing something, have to be occupied, have to have social director, need to be going on a cruise, going to a concert, going out with friends, can't sit
with
alone,
themselves. Yeah,
right? Cannot sit with self because that's too hard, too painful, because it's aloneness. And that goes back to attachments.
There's too much attacking you. There's too much
anxiety, or there's too much anxiety that something potential anticipated is coming. Which, is it really? Is there realistic, rational, or reasonableness to that? Probably not. Usually I find nothing for people when we do the exercise, but it's this, like I have to be fulfilled and I have to have this attachment. And really everything in life, talk about growth, right? Goes back to, what's your attachment style? And most people's is very insecure. And there's so many styles. There's, the avoidant type. There's the ambivalent type. There's a mixture. There's dismissive type with avoidant type. There's
define attachment. That'll be more specific.
So attachment is what bonds you have built in early childhood that set you up for now how you live your life down the line, of how you relate to others, how you need from others, what you expect or don't expect from others, how you learn to, it's all the learning that happened from 0 to 6. It's actually from 0 to 3, but 0 to 6 really sets it in stone for you. And then everything else follows. So, you become a style because of how you were taught, through nurturing, lack of nurturing, avoidance, lack of avoidance to you, how you got your needs met versus how you didn't get them met. Going back to what I said sort of at the top of the show about born into deprivation, there is trauma. Because you have depression, you have anxiety about the world around you, that if you're deprived, you don't get fed on schedule. Babies are very scheduled, right? Or you don't have, safety in your home, right? Or you have a fear, even in 0 to 1 years old, of anticipation that if you cry, no one meets that need right away. That sets you up for an attachment that's not good to the world or to other people. And then how does that translate? People, often still are in that mindset of, oh, well, childhood doesn't matter. Yeah, it sets you up for everything. And attachment is everything. It really, truly is, because at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're relating. We're always relating, right? We're hardwired to relate. And we're not supposed to be isolative. We're not supposed to be alone. We know through great research, social psychology and other psychology, that when we sit alone, we're much more, our mortality rate changes, our health level changes physically, our mental health goes down. People choose sometimes to be isolative. Doesn't mean you have to get into a relationship and get married. It means you need to be able to connect and have that. And when you have poor attachments and you have, I call them transient attachments, where you're seeking them in an unhealthy way and you push boundaries and you get excluded and you get pushed out of people's lives because you're so disorganized type of attachment, right? Which is a lot of people, especially with people who have like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or really severe anxiety disorders. Then that really pushes people's buttons to detach. Even though they want the attachment, they will find ways to make it so that they're not attached. And that,
because it's too unilateral.
It's too right, and it's too it's very demanding and commanding, because it comes from not getting what they needed early on in life. And if we go back to many, many, many shows ago, I think it probably was either last summer or the summer before, I did the show on the 4 S's, and talking about the basic intentional needs of children who they don't get met. We all come into this world and need the 4 S's, right? We need to be seen, heard, seen, right? But we'll keep it at the S. Soothed, safe and secure, emotionally and physically. And any one of those gets wobbly, and the wellness wheel gets wobbly on those things. It sets up a person, because that's attachment, right? The more we're seen and heard, the more we're soothed in a healthy way, the more secure and safe we feel in general about others and the world around us, makes us more independently confident. And therefore we have good attachments. We go ahead in life and have good things. Those are off in any one way, we start messing with the formula of the trajectory of the way people function in the world, which is why we see so many people functioning poorly.
Because that's how you would describe any good relationship. Yes,
because in any good relationship, whether it's with friends, intimate relationships, job relationships, family, you need to be seen. You need to have validation, which would be the soothing if we generalize it, right? Validation, so soothing, safety, so emotionally to express oneself and or physically be present, to be held in the space of a room that's not going to be attacking.
Right.
And then secure, both emotionally and physically, that we're not going to be threatened. We're not going to be manipulated. We're not going to be coerced. We're not going to have those things happen. People who do not grow up in a place where they have those things are very pressuring of other people to get maneuvered by that. And that happens on a continuum of there's most people are sort of in the lighter to moderate range of that if they have that. And then you've got the really severe cases, which is you see in more severely mentally ill people, because they've been deprived more, or they have an organic organicity of themselves in their family genetics, and then lack of nurturing and deprivation of some sort leads to their trauma, and then it leaks out onto their lives, and they have poor relational skills, which that's the avoidant type or the ambivalent type, or the preoccupied type, the dismissive, like someone who's very I want to love you, and I want to honor you, and I want to be wonderful with you, and you didn't do what I wanted, now I'm going to hate on you, right? And that happens, and that's why you laughed, right? Because it's just and in psychology, a lot of times that would fall under features of personality disorders, like narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder. It doesn't necessarily reach the whole level of the full-blown diagnostic criteria, but it's there, and that's really hard because there's so many people out there like that. because they come from deprivation of attachment.
Yep.
And they're looking so hard for it that they build poor relationships with people, and they have a pattern of that.
And unfortunately, it's become largely generational.
And it is, yeah, I would say that my generation, our generations, they don't have it in the same way that I would say the 20 and 30-year-olds right now have it. Very different. And then even the younger, I think the younger, under 18 right now, even under 15, is sort of looping back. I see a trend of looping back to a little bit healthier, because I think we've had such a tumultuous 2 or 3 decades of that of raising kids in that we're going backwards to something healthier.
There's a trend to having kids isn't perfunctory anymore. People
Correct.
who are having kids are intentional about having kids.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's not just like you're 18 and 19 and you just have them to have them.
Yeah.
Right. Because, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I see a trend shifting, and I think that there's so much more about mental health and healthy, parenting, sort of, I still think that teaching kids early on, like middle school on, about what parenting really is, and like the psychology of youth, like even early on, for kids to understand like how they even grew up by the time they're in high school, like what was giving them their base and their core before they even get to be 14 and 15 years old would be helpful.
Yeah.
Instead of some of the other things that they're teaching.
14 and 15 is when it gets hard.
Well, that's right. So if we can front load it by the like 11 and 12 age appropriate to start dealing with, like, hey, when you grow up and you came from this environment, people are so worried about talking to kids about their growing up years when they're still in their growing up years, because they don't want to do any damage. Well, the damage is already done. So you should be talking about it while they're like, that was really hard for you. And, that was damaging. And you have to be mindful that, when you come, like, I'm very clear with like kids and their parents. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of the parents that work with me love that, because I'm really clear with them. If they sit in session, like in their 10 and 11, I have parents that sit with their kids in session, and we talk really openly about their relationship and how it was and how it is and where it's going. And I see very different trajectories. And I think if I had any of my parents come in and talk about it, or any of the kids, they'd be like, oh yeah, it's great, because it's not that kind of old school, like, don't talk about that. Let's just, and I do see a lot of times parents will be like, fix my kid, but you got to come in with them, because we're going to fix together. We're going to do it together, because it's not the kid.
But that's empowering the kid to the point that they have some control over what's going to happen from here on out.
Which part?
Talking to them about their traumas, talking to them about their childhood, it's empowering them.
Yes, it's empowering also to have it so that the kid doesn't end up having resentment and then blaming, and then we have a 20-year-old that's ticked off at their parents, or a 15-year-old that's ticked off at their parents.
Vaguely ticked off. They don't know quite why.
Right, because no one's talking about it, and no one's, and they're, and I think I don't know if you were raised like this, but certainly my era and a lot of my friends and I was raised with like, you don't talk about what happens in this house. What happens in this house doesn't leave this house. Like, it's so insane, because it's so unhealthy. And by the way, if you have to say that to a kid, like, you aren't allowed to talk about what happens in this house, there's something going on in that house.
Yeah.
And
you're aware of it.
And the parents are aware of it, which is why they're telling you that. And they should be backing up into their awareness, going, I shouldn't be saying that, because that means that, and I still see that. I don't see it as much as I used to, but I definitely still see it on occasion of, the parents are worried about what the kid's saying in session. So I often will say, come on in, because let's talk, right? Like, instead of, because I always hold the confidentiality of the kid, because they're minor, unless they're going to hurt themselves or someone else. But it's about, how do you have growth from your attachment at 10, 11, 12 years old, if you've got issues with your parent? And I have, and a lot of times there's a very there's not, I don't see any physical abuse typically, but I see a lot of emotional, unintentional most of the time. Sometimes it's intentional, but most of the time, very unintentional emotional abuse, because the parent is doing what they think is going to get the kid to do what is the right thing by maneuvering them into this place with fears that are not accurate, or giving very falsified information about something just to get them, like, and I always say to the parent, like, they're going to find out that's not true, right? Like, about various issues. And they're like, yeah, but they don't need to know that now. I'm like, yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Don't tell them that, because what you're doing, you're setting them up for coming into not feeling attached to you because you lied to them,
Right.
or you
manipulating
them. And it's a coping strategy to get them to do what you want, but they're going to figure it out and they're going to be like, wow. So so it's, and people just don't realize. That's why I say it should be starting early on. And we just don't have that, unfortunately. But if you're listening and you're a young parent with a young set of kids, young meaning that you're just new to it, or you're in the first 10 years, take this as like a growth opportunity for you, because it's clearing that lawn. It's clearing the field for the growth of the,
fix your 16-year-old problems now.
right. And
8, 9,
you
6, 5.
yourself,
Yep.
because it's a reparenting of yourself, going back to those 4 S's, right? If you're an adult now and you're 40 or 50 or 60 or whatever, or even 30, and you know these things and you're relating and going, aha, oh my gosh, you're speaking my language. Use your 4 S's. It's not your parents' responsibility to fix your 4 S's. It's yours.
Yep.
Because you're not going to get what you didn't get back then all of a sudden now from parents that you have, because they're going to still be the same.
Plus, parenting should be an epiphany. When you're seeing your kids
Right.
develop, you should understand.
You'd
you
hope.
should have more awareness of what happened to you and why you got where you are.
Right. Well, you would
and
hope.
what you can do about it.
That's a nice thought.
What?
To have that would be epiphany for people.
Well,
it's not. I mean, it's a nice thought, though. I mean,
One of the
for
most-
some people it is. You had it.
one of the most fundamental things about being a parent is just that mindset, that perspective that if you're into the kid, right, and you're parenting well, you just learn so much about being a human from the second time around.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that there's 4 parenting styles, or there's 5 if you read that, but there's 4 parenting styles. The only real parenting style that kind of thing can come from is authoritative, which is the healthiest kind, which is you're high in warmth and praise, and you're high in expectation that's age appropriate to the child. Do you know how many parents I know that are like that?
No, that's a big fault.
Right. I see a lot of authoritarian, like very rigid and structured, and like do as I say, not as I do. Fear mongering to like control the child to like, either believe in a certain thing based on their beliefs, like whether it's religious, social, political, like it's right. Or I see all the way on the other side, very permissive and indulgent, like low in expectation, high in warmth, or very low in warmth and very low in expectation, whatever goes.
Kids rise or fall to your expectations.
Right. And
set
so
good expectations.
You have these 3 types of parenting that puts your kid into a very deficited space. And when you have a genetic run of mental health issues in a family that's really obvious, and then you have one of those styles, you're creating just a bigger problem.
Yeah.
Because it's harder to live, going back to the top of the hour, right? It's harder to live with an intention of health because you don't really know what health is. So what you do is you learn the style that your parent has taught you to then use it to your advantage to get other people to do, you just mimic it and parallel it at a higher heightened sense to get what you need in an unhealthy way.
Plus, even all those techniques aside, modeling is the most important thing.
Right.
If you're not living the life,
right,
then it doesn't translate.
And people that like, especially authoritarian people, they live that life of, I have a high expectation. If you fail it, the shame comes in. Like, and then the kid models it. It's a very bad.
Yeah.
And I don't use bad a lot, but it's a bad pattern because it leads to codependency. It leads to lack of self-confidence. It leads to very pressured relationships. You see a lot of abusive relationships be created out of that, in terms of especially men abusing women because they have been abused themselves in some way, right? The trauma sits there. A whole nother show on that, but growth is not an option in the same way, right? Because the person is so rigidly contained that they have a hard time seeing outside the box. Indulgent and permissive types see outside the box and usually are, it's a totally different thing, right? But same problems can arise, but in a different way.
Yeah.
At those other ends of the spectrum, you usually see a lot of other things. But for good growth, coming back to just the end of the show, for good growth going into May 1st, really think about like how to be more self-aware of like what you're bringing to the table, and set your day with an intention of being a better you. Yeah. Be better today. Are you a person who, pushes people's buttons, work on that. If you're a person that brings people smiles, do more, right? If do things with intention, and whatever that is. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it today.
The May of me.
The May of me, the year of you, and the May of me. All right. So everybody have a fantastic first week of May, and I will see you here next week. Thank you.